Uh, Good afternoon. I set my alarm for PM instead of AM. I'm afraid I didn't get to watch yesterday's session while fully awake, and I guess my body needed extra sleep still because of the mix up with the thing. It looks like court got a late start today, so it's not going to be as much work to get things caught up. Uh, we're about an hour behind real time, so we'll just set this to 1.25 and we'll get going here. So, um, my apologies, but looks like it's not going to be too bad. Um, Here we go.
Yes, Judge, I just wanted to alert the court, put it on the record that Attorney Schoenhorn had an opportunity to inspect both binders that Ms. Roy is with on the witness stand, and he designated the items he wanted photocopied. We made arrangements for that and provided him with those copies.
Thank you.
That's correct.
Thank you. We can bring the jury up, please. Counsel stipulate, please.
Yes, Judge. Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Roy, where we left off, we were talking about swabbings on lab item number 99 and door panel taken from the Toyota Tacoma. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes, I do.
And specifically, we had gotten up to S1 through S5, which are depicted in the photograph, which is currently on the screen as lab 99 door panel. Did you do screening tests for blood on those particular swabbings?
Yes, I did.
And what were the results?
They all tested negative with the screening test for blood.
And did you continue to do, you did additional swabs on the store, did you not?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and I want to ask you specifically about S6, S7, S8, and S9. There are arrows on this photograph. Are those the general areas where you swapped?
Yes.
Okay. And did you do presumptive or screening tests for those particular swabbings as well?
Yes.
And what were the results?
S6, I got a weak positive. The next one you're asking me about is S7.
Yes.
I got a positive with the screening test. And then the next one was S9,
And what were the results of S9?
positive, weak positive.
And when you indicated you did a screening test, which particular test did you do?
I used the old toluidine one, which is the more sensitive test, but has a carcinogen in it. So I used it under the hood.
And directing your attention now to 99S11, which is also displayed in this photograph, was that a swabbing that you took of the door handle itself?
Yes, after I removed it from the door panel, I swabbed it.
And did you do a screening test on that as well?
Yes, I did.
And what were the results?
One of the swabs tested positive and other three I didn't test.
I believe you indicated that this presumptive test, or this, I'm calling it a presumptive test, the screening test that you did can also react with certain cleaning agents. Is that correct?
Yes, but the way we do the test at work is that it's a two-step test. So we add the first solution, which contains the colorless chemical, which if hemoglobin is present, the heme and hemoglobin, it'll turn color. But if we add that to our sample and we get any kind of color change, then we would note that, and that would be a failed test. So one of the cleaning agents that might be present could cause that. So then we would go on, if we didn't see any kind of color change or anything, we would add our second solution, which is hydrogen peroxide. And then that would cause the whole reaction to occur. And then you look at what color develops. And in the case of Castlemeyer, it should be a bright pink and it develops very quickly. And then with oltoludine, it's like a teal, blue-green color, and that also develops very quickly. And we don't go beyond 10 seconds when we're reading the result for either of those tests. So the way we do the test, we know how it should react, and any difference from that, we note it, and it's either called a failed test or inconclusive.
And did you remove any trace material from the door?
Yes, I did.
And what type of trace material did you remove from the door?
One hair-like fiber and other trace material.
And was that designated as 99S14?
Yes, it was.
Now, when you remove trace material such as hair, did you personally test the hair yourself?
No, I didn't examine the hair.
Who did?
Anita Valones was the hair examiner on this case.
So essentially, you would have removed the item and retained it, and then eventually Ms. Valonis would have reviewed it.
She would have examined it, yes.
And directing your attention now to 99S15, what was that?
That was,
Sorry, it was a different photo. 99S15.
that was swabbing of the fabric panel, not along the edge, but that around the other area that wasn't swabbed.
And did you do a screening test for blood on that?
Yes, I did.
And what were the results?
Very weak positive.
And just before I forget, I want to go back to State Police Exhibit 154, Lab Submission 96. I don't think I showed you this photograph. This is Lab 96 3S1. This was the FedEx envelope that was part of Submission 96. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And did you also swab this envelope for potential touch DNA?
Yes, I did.
What part of the envelope did you swab?
The flap area, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you can see that's the adhesive side of the flap area. And then I swabbed a little bit into the envelope opening in the interior. So it would have been that flap area and then a little bit into the envelope interior.
And again, all of these swabbings were forwarded to DNA. Is that correct? Well, actually, strike that. Some of these swabbings were submitted to DNA. Is that correct?
Most of my swabbings were submitted to DNA, yes.
Your Honor, I'm just going to publish the stipulation here. This is State's Exhibit 103, Paragraph 1. State Police Exhibit 500A, seized from Hartford by Sergeant Kevin Duggan on May 30th, 2019, and identified as one white Hanes t-shirt, size 2XL, with blood-like staining, contained within State Police Exhibit 499, seized from the scene, corner of Albany Avenue and Garden Street, Hartford, Connecticut, was subsequently submitted to the Division of Scientific Services and designated as Submission 49. So I'm just going to display the photograph in here, which is titled Lab 49, period SP 500A. And Your Honor, at this time, I'll just alert the court and the jury to a stipulation between the parties that upon further testing and investigation, this particular submission was unrelated to this case.
Thank you.
That's by agreement. That's so stipulated.
Thank you.
Reading again from State's Exhibit 103, specifically paragraph 2. State Police Exhibit 502A, seized from Hartford by Sergeant Kevin Duggan on May 31st, 2019, and identified as one clear plastic bag with a blood-like substance contained within State Police Exhibit 502, seized from the scene, corner of Albany Avenue and Green Street, Hartford, Connecticut, was subsequently submitted to the Division of Scientific Services and designated as Submission 50. Ms. Valonis, did you work or do any analysis on submission number 50?
Oh, yeah, I'm Christine Murray.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yes, I did examine number 50.
So I'm opening the folder entitled State Police Exhibit 502A, Lab Submission 50. And I'm going to display the photograph Lab 50 paren with caper added. Ms. Fotis, can you tell the jury?
It's
What we're
Mr.
looking
Roy,
at.
Mr. Roy, counsel.
Oh, my goodness, I'm sorry. I have Ms. Fotis on my mind. She's next. Ms. Roy, what are we looking at here?
So this is the submission number 50, which had a poncho-like appearance. It had what looked like a neck opening and 2 arm openings, and then the bottom was open. What it didn't have was a hood, so that's why I would call it poncho-like. So I put the paper in to kind of, the white paper to kind of show where the armholes are and the neck opening is, and then where the bottom of the bag is. So that's what's in this picture. And then it also has reddish brown staining that was at the bottom front. And I just tested a very small area with the chemical screening test for blood. It was positive. And then I forward this to latent prints.
And I'm just going to depict a photograph, lab 50 paren as received. Is this another photograph of the poncho as the laboratory received it?
Yes,
And I believe you designated this as side A, is that correct?
yes,
You mentioned that this particular object did not have a hood, so you described it as poncho-like.
yeah, poncho-like, because a poncho you would think of having a hood.
And I'm displaying now photograph lab 50 period 1S1 and 50 1S2 period SP 502A. You indicated that you took swabbings of this particular object, is that correct?
Correct. Now, these 2 pictures are post-latent print examination, which is why they're very blackish.
Latent prints used a dusting powder or something to that effect to try to develop prints, is that right?
Correct.
Did you do your swabbings before or after latent prints?
I collected my samples after latent prints.
And I see here that there are 2 swabbings designated, is that right?
That's correct.
And what particular areas did you swab?
So this was down side B, which had that heavy reddish brown staining, where I did a single KM test before it went to latent prints. So that's that area of the poncho, or sorry, poncho-like bag.
And you used a Kastle-Meyer screening test on these 2 swabbings as well?
Yes, I did.
And the results were positive?
Yes.
Showing you a photo entitled Lab 50 S1 SP 502A CR. What are we looking at here?
That's the trace material that I collected from this poncho-like bag. And there were 4 hair-like fibers that I collected. And then there was quite a bit of reddish brown flakes and crust that came off the submission and other trace material, which I collected in a tin. And those were both retained at the laboratory.
Published States Exhibit 103. This is paragraph 3. State Police Exhibit 502B, seized from Hartford by Sergeant Kevin Duggan on May 31st, 2019, and identified as 1 clear plastic bag with blood-like substance contained within State Police Exhibit 502, seized from the scene, corner of Albany Avenue and Green Street, Hartford, Connecticut, was subsequently submitted to the Division of Scientific Services and designated as Submission 51. And I'm going to be opening the folder on States 109 entitled State Police Exhibit 502B, Lab Submission 51. Did you do an analysis of Lab Submission 51?
Yes, I did.
And what was that?
It was a poncho, a plastic, clear plastic poncho.
So submission number 50 you described as poncho-like, 51 you're describing as a poncho. What were the difference between the 2?
The 51 had a hood.
I'm going to display the photograph Lab 51 as received. Can you tell the jury what we're looking at here?
So the top picture is how it came out of the submission packaging. And then the bottom picture is how it was, I laid it out on the lab bench with the brown paper underneath. And in that picture on the bottom, you can see where the hood is folded down And there's two openings on either side for the arm, and then an opening along the bottom. You can also see a heavy stained area over on the, what would be the right side of when you're wearing the poncho.
And can you describe the heavy stained area for the jury?
It was blackish, brownish, reddish brown.
Showing you now the photograph in that folder entitled Lab 51 back with white paper added. Can you just explain to the jury why you added white paper here?
Just to show the structure of the poncho, how that area that was stuck together over on the right upper side where the right arm would have been coming out, and also just to show more detail of that area. So I'm taking pictures as I'm examining it. I'm not sure what it is. And then the one in the lower left, I did notice a hair-like fiber on the interior of the bag. So I went in and collected that single hair-like fiber because that I wanted to retain. And that's in the lower left photo.
And did this particular item also go to latent prints?
Yes, it did.
I'm going to show you Lab 51 post latent print, white paper added. Is this obviously after it went to latent prints and why it's a darker consistency?
Yes, that's why it's blackish.
Did you perform any screening tests on this particular item?
Yes, I did.
And how many screening tests did you perform?
How many individual times I tested stains? I tested 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 areas.
Okay. I just want to show you a photograph entitled Lab 51, 1S3, and S4, and S5, and S6, and S8. This particular item was swabbed 8 separate times. Is that correct?
I took 8 samples from this poncho, but the first one I collected was trace. So there's actually 7 swabbings that I did from this poncho.
Understood. And so I want to direct your attention now to swabbing 51 1S3. That was of a reddish brown stain exterior as received. Is that correct?
Yes,
And did you do any screening tests on that?
yes, that was the area that I tested on my initial examination. And then I went back after latent prints and collected it.
And what were the results of the screening test?
It was positive.
And 51S4 was described by you as a reddish brown stain at the front lower opening. Is that correct?
Correct.
And did you do a screening test for blood on that particular swabbing?
Yes, I did.
And what were the results?
It was positive.
51 1S5 was described by you as a swabbing of a reddish brown stained hood top area. Did you do a screening test on that particular swabbing?
Yes, I did.
And what were the results?
It was positive.
And 51 1S6 was a swabbing from the interior hood. That was just for touch DNA. Is that correct?
Yes, in this case, I collected it for possible wear, biological material that might be left behind. And I did not test those swabs.
When you say you didn't test the swabs, they were forwarded to DNA. They just weren't tested for screening test for blood. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now 51 1S7 is not displayed in this particular photograph. I'm going to pull up a photograph entitled Lab 51 1S6 and 51 1S7. You described that as a reddish brown staining interior front. Did you do a screening test on that?
Yes, I did.
And what were the results?
It was positive.
And just to jump back to the previous photo, which displays 51 1S8. That was an additional swabbing that you did of the exterior of the hood. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
I'm just going to zoom in on that. And this was for touch DNA. Is that right?
That's correct.
So no screening test was done on that particular swabbing.
No, I didn't.
And I'm just displaying a photograph until 51 1S2Y. What are we looking at here?
I have to refer to my report.
So that's fine. Maybe if I show you this. I'm showing you
Oh,
now
okay.
51S2. It's a closer up photograph of that.
I just didn't recognize it.
Oh, no,
It was
that's
so
quite all right.
small. Yes, that was a white hardish-like material with some reddish brown staining on it.
And did you do any screening or confirmatory tests on this?
Yes, not initially when it was collected, but later on I was asked to. And Anita Valones had taken a swabbing of the white hardish material, and I did testing on that swabbing. And then it was positive with the screening test. And then I did the hemotrace test, which was positive. So that meant that human blood was indicated. And then I forwarded those swabs to DNA.
So in total, you did in your analysis in this case, 3 confirmatory blood tests. Is that correct?
In all of my analysis for the whole case,
Confirmatory, yes.
yes,
And that would have been on the, just to be clear, the bra, the shirt, and this particular item. Is that correct?
yes, the swabbing of the reddish brown,
And all 3 came back positive for blood. Is that correct?
correct.
Just going to publish the stipulation, Your Honor, paragraph 7 from states 103. State Police 502H, State Police Exhibit 502H, seized from Hartford by Sergeant Kevin Duggan on May 3rd and identified as 4 large white zip ties with blood-like substance contained within State Police Exhibit 502, seized from the scene, corner of Albany Avenue and Green Street, Hartford, Connecticut, was subsequently submitted to the Division of Scientific Services and designated as submission 52. Did you do analysis on submission number 52?
Yes, I did.
What was submission number 52?
It was 4 white zip ties.
And were each of those zip ties given their own designation?
Yes, I designated them as 52-1, 52-2, 52-3, and 52-4.
And within the State's Exhibit 109, specifically the folder marked State Police Exhibit 502H lab submission number 52, I'm displaying a photograph lab 52 1S1 through 52 4S1. Can you just explain to the jury what we're looking at here?
So this is after the LP examination, so they do look blackish. So it shows on the 52-1 and 52-2, as they were received, they were cut. So they're, when you use a zip tie, you make a loop when you use it, and then that loop appears to have been cut. Of course, it could have been some other mechanism, but it was cut, separated. And then 52-3 and 52-4 were found not being in a loop conformation. So 52-1 and 52-4 had a lot of reddish brown staining on them, which would make collecting areas for touch difficult. So I tested 2 areas on 52-1 and 2 areas on 52-2 using the screening test for blood, and they were both positive. And then when I did that before it went to latent prints. And then when I got it back from latent prints on each of those items, I did a swabbing of the whole item. So I would have, on 52-1, it was designated 52-1S1, and that was the entire surface. And then 52-2, again, I tested 2 areas on the textured side, so not to interfere with anything on latent prints. And then after I got it back from latent prints, I swabbed the entire surface, and that was 52-2S1. Now, 52-3 and 52-4 had very little blood on them. So on the textured side of 52-3, I did see a reddish brown stain, and I tested it, and then it was positive with the screening test for blood, and then I collected it as 52-3S2. And there were other stains, but there were very little reddish brown. And after latent prints, I went and swabbed the whole entire surface, and that would have been 52-3S3. I also collected a fiber-like trace material, and that I designated 52-3S1, and I collected that before it went to latent prints. And now 32-4, There's very little reddish brown staining and it was faint. So I didn't test those. When it came back from latent prints, I swabbed the entire surface and that was designated as 52-4S1. And the little circles were tags that I put on each one of those zip ties just to keep the designation correct and initial them with my initials.
And you mentioned that you did do one screening test on 52-3, is that correct?
Yes, I collected that reddish brown stain. It was on the textured side, so I was okay to collect before it went to latent prints, and I collected it.
And were those swabbings submitted for DNA analysis?
Yes.
Going to publish a stipulation, states, reading from states 103, paragraph 8. State Police Exhibit 502I, seized from Hartford by Sergeant Kevin Duggan on May 31st, 2019, and identified as one white standard textile towel with blood-like substance contained within State Police Exhibit 502, seized from the scene, corner of Albany Avenue and Green Street, Hartford, Connecticut, was subsequently submitted to the Division of Scientific Services, designated as submission 53. You also worked on submission 53, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you describe submission 53 for the jury?
It's a white towel, bath type towel.
So I'm just going to project a photo entitled Lab 53S1. Well, actually, before I get there. This is Lab 53S1 and 53S2. Could you just indicate to the jury what we're looking at here?
That's the two sides of the towel. You can see the reddish brown stains and the light reddish brown stains, and there's also some blackish stains.
And did you take swabbings of this towel, or did you actually cut a piece of the towel, or both?
I took cuttings.
And can we see where you cut in this particular photograph?
Yes, on the upper picture.
I'll zoom.
Oh, on the bottom.
So on the top photograph, there's a designation S2 previously removed with an arrow. What does that denote?
That shows where I removed a cutting from the towel for 53S2.
And was that submitted for DNA analysis?
Yes, it was.
Was any screening test performed on that particular part of the towel?
Yes, it was.
And what were the results of the screening test?
It was positive.
And just to be clear, positive for blood. Is that
Oh,
correct?
positive for the screening test for blood.
Correct. Now I'm going to zoom in on the bottom photograph here. And we see a designation on the left-hand side, S1 previously removed. Was that an area of the towel that you removed for additional testing?
Yes, it was.
And what type of testing did you do on that area of the towel?
I did the screening test for blood and it was positive, and then I cut out a sample and then sent a portion of that cutting to DNA.
And did you say the result of what the screening test was?
It was positive.
And this is just lab photograph 53S1. Is this a closer up view of 53S1, the cutting that you took from the towel?
Yes, it is.
And 53S2, is this the piece of the towel that you cut and designated as 53S2?
Yes.
And 53S3, what was that?
Can you click on it? Sure, thank you. That was one hair-like fiber and other trace material, including some blackish particles that I saw on the towel.
And was that retained for further analysis?
Yes, it was.
And I'm just going to zoom in here on the photograph. There's the acronym HLF. Does that stand for hair-like fiber?
Yes, it does.
If we look very carefully where the mouse is now over, is that the hair-like fiber?
Yes, it is.
Publishing paragraph 10 of states 103. State Police 502K, seized from Hartford by Sergeant Kevin Duggan on May 31st, 2019, and identified as 4 pieces of black plastic garbage bag with black duct tape attached to 2 pieces contained within State Police Exhibit 502, seized from the scene, corner of Albany Avenue and Green Street, Hartford, Connecticut, was subsequently submitted to the Division of Scientific Services and designated as submission 88. Did you do analysis of submission 88?
Yes, I did.
Now, submission 88 was actually given 3 separate designations, correct? 88.1, 88.2, and 88.3.
That's correct.
And 88.1, as I understand it, was actually 2 bags which were taped together. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So I'm displaying a photo entitled Lab 88.1, which is in States 109, the folder indicating State Police Exhibit 502K, Lab Submission 88. Is this item 88-1?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Where would the tape have been in this particular photograph? Or where would it be located on the bags, I guess?
Where the 2 like grayish marker arrows are.
So you're indicating that there's the photograph displays 2 separate arrows, one pointing to the bottom of the photo and one pointing up, and the tape would have been somewhere in that area.
Yes, there was multiple pieces of tape in that area, whereas the aerial pointing down was 1 piece of tape.
And did you do swabbings of this particular exhibit?
Yes, I did.
Displaying a photograph entitled Lab 88-1S1. Is this the first swabbing that you took?
Yes, I took a swabbing of the exterior of the single piece of tape. I'm sorry, the non-adhesive side.
Would that have been before the prints were moved in, obviously?
Yes,
And did you do any presumptive tests on that, or just for touch DNA?
I just collected it for touch and I didn't do any screening tests for it.
And then Lab 88-1S2. What are we seeing here?
That was where there was a tangle of black tape, and I swabbed the non-adhesive side of the areas that were exposed in that tape, that tangle of tape.
And again, for touch DNA?
Yes,
And then Lab 88-1S3. What area was swabbed here?
that was a reddish brown stain on the. There was one of the bags was damaged and the other bag was not damaged. So that's how I designated the 2 bags, the damaged bag and the non-damaged bag. So 88-1S3 was a reddish brown stain on the exterior of the non-damaged bag adjacent to the black tape.
And did you do any screening tests for blood on that particular swabbing?
Yes, I did.
And what were the results?
It was positive for the screening test.
Showing you photograph Lab 88.1S4. What was that a swabbing of?
That was the damaged bag, the interior lower corner, both sides. Now I will back up and tell you that the damaged bag is received inside out. And that's assuming that the manufacturer's printed information is printed on the exterior. And the non-damaged bag was received outside out. Again, that's assuming that the manufacturer's information got printed on the exterior of the bag.
And was 88.1S4 a swabbing of a reddish brown area?
Yes,
And did you do any screening tests for blood?
yes,
And what were the results?
it was positive for the screening test for blood.
88.1S6, that was a swabbing from the exterior opening of the non-damaged plastic bag. Is that correct?
Yes, this was collected post latent print examination.
And on this particular photograph, Lab 88.1S6, the top photograph, actually the bottom as well, have sort of a grayish circular marker. Is that the area that was swabbed for 88.1S6?
Yes, it was. So the pictures are the 2 sides of the bag.
And then 88.1S7, that was a swabbing from the exterior opening of the damaged bag. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you also swabbed that for DNA?
Yes, both sides of the bag.
No screening test done on 88.1S6 or 1S7, is that correct?
That's correct.
And is that because there was no reddish blood substance that was being swabbed in that particular area?
No, it was because I was collecting them for touch.
And then, did you locate anything within, or, excuse me, Mr. Parisi had located something within 88.1, is that correct?
That's correct.
Right, so I'm going to pull up a photograph entitled Lab 88.1. Sue? Can you tell the jury what we're looking at here?
One folded lengthwise black plastic garbage bag.
And this was designated as having come from inside 88-1, is that correct?
Yes.
Did you take any swabbings of this?
There was a stain, brownish stain, and I tested that with a screening test for blood. It was positive, and then I collected it as 88-1-2S1.
And I'm displaying lab 88.1.2S1. Is that what we're looking at here?
Yes, I think if you go to the top picture, you can see the circle is around that stain. Yes.
And you also did analysis of designation 88-2, is that correct?
That's correct.
What was 88-2?
It was one black plastic garbage bag.
And were swabbings taken of 88-2?
Yes, there were.
So within that exhibit, Your Honor, I'm calling up folder State Police Exhibit 502K, lab submission 88, folder 88-2. Can you tell the jury what we're looking at here?
So both of those pictures are the exterior of the garbage bag, and they're the same side of the garbage bag because there's quite a bit of testing and drawing. So I have two pictures, two photos.
And I want to direct your attention now to the swabbings that you took, specifically 88-2S1. That was a swabbing of a latent print partially outlined exterior. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that's because Mr. Parisi had actually done some analysis of this for fingerprints, correct? Already?
Yes,
So you tried to swab the fingerprint to see if you could get some type of DNA or blood?
yes.
And did you do a screening test for blood on the fingerprint?
Yes, I did.
And it came back negative, is that right?
That's correct.
88-2S2, which is the second swab that you took, that was of a reddish brown stain on the exterior of the bag, correct?
Yes,
All right, I'm just going to try to zoom in. Did you do a screening test of S2 here?
yes, I did.
And the results were positive, is that right?
That's correct.
And S3, which is seen in the upper left corner of the lower photograph, you did a swabbing in that area and did a screening test for blood as well, correct?
Yes, I did.
And the results were positive?
Yes,
And then S4 is, I guess, in the top third of the bag in the center where my mouse is. That was of a brownish stain on the exterior, correct?
yes,
And did you do a screening test of that?
yes, it was positive.
Incidentally, it's difficult to see in the photographs the reddish brown stains. Were you visually inspecting these for stains?
Yes. And I was aided by what we call a crime light. It's basically a flashlight, a laboratory flashlight that has white light.
88-2S5, was that of a reddish brown stain from the bag's exterior?
Yes,
And did you do a screening test for blood for that? And
yes,
what were the results?
it was positive.
And that particular area is displayed in photograph lab 88-2S5 and 2S6 in the upper right photograph. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now I want to direct your attention to the lower photograph in this particular image, 88-2S6. That was a swabbing from the opening exterior right here for touch DNA. Is that right?
That's correct.
So no screening test done on that.
Correct.
And then 88-2S7 was a swabbing that you took of the reddish brown stain on the interior of the bag. Is that correct?
Yes,
And did you do any screening tests on that?
yes,
And what were the results?
positive.
And then 88-2S8.
Excuse me, Your Honor, can we at least have clarification? Positive for what?
Oh, positive for the screening test for blood.
Thank you.
88-2S8 was the 8th swab that you took of this particular item, and this was of a reddish brown stain on the interior of the bag. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Just going to zoom in to the top photograph here. Is there's a gray circular area here. Is this the area that you swabbed?
Yes,
And did you do a screening test for blood on this particular swabbing as well?
yes.
And what were the results?
It was positive for the screen test of blood.
And you also worked on submission designation 88-3, is that correct? Was that, no, that was Ms. Valonis?
Yes, Anita Valonis examined the knotted plastic bag.
Publishing States Exhibit 103, paragraph 11. State Police Exhibit 502S, seized from Hartford by Sergeant Kevin Duggan on May 31st, 2019, and identified as one metal scraper with a broken blade, contained within State Police Exhibit 502, seized from the scene, corner of Albany Avenue and Green Street, Hartford, Connecticut, was subsequently submitted to the Division of Scientific Services and designated as submission 40. And I'm going to open the folder entitled State Police Exhibit 502S, lab submission 40.
Council, it's now 3:20. We will take our afternoon recess until, let's call it 3:35.
Yes, sir.
All right. This honorable Superior Court now stands in recess until 3:35. May I
The
ask the
council
clerk-
approach, please.
Yes, Judge.
Yes, Judge.
Your Honor. Thank you.
I introduced this, you're right. Yeah, I did.
The council stipulate.
Yes, Judge. Yes. Ms. Roy, where we left off, we were talking about State Police Exhibit 502S, which was submitted to the lab and designated as submission number 40, a metal scraper. Do you recall? That's where we left off.
Yes, I do.
And I'm just going to display a photograph, lab 40S1 and 40S2 for the jury. Just directing your attention specifically to the top photograph. Can you just let the jury know what we're looking at here?
That's one side of the glass scraper, and it shows one area that I tested. There was like an orangish, reddish, I think I described it as orange, reddish, rust-like stain. It was KM negative. And then I did not see any blood-like stains. And so I did 2 swabbings of this tool. The first one was the blade holder area and the partial blade, which was 40S1. I swabbed that for touch. And then both sides. And then the second swabbing I did was 40S2. And that was what I call the tool part, where your hand would go, and both sides. And that was again designated as 40S2, and that was also for touch.
And again, those swabbings were submitted to DNA. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then I did just want to go back briefly to one folder, specifically State Police Exhibit 502K, lab submission 88, and the folder titled 88.3. You did not examine 88.3, which was a black plastic bag, but you did examine some contents that were found inside of it. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm just going to begin by showing you a photo entitled lab 88.3.1S1. Can you just let the jury know what we're looking at here?
So that is one piece of cardboard located inside bag.
And did you do any analysis of this?
I didn't see any blood-like stains. So I just swabbed it for touch, both sides, and I designated that swabbing as S1. And the photo, that's the white paper with a little bit of darkish flecks, that was found on, on the examination paper after I swabbed the cardboard. And then I just packaged that up and put it back into the item envelope packaging that 88-3-1 was in.
And then photograph 88-3-2S1.
Again, that's a piece of paper that was located on the outside of 88-3. And that there was no blood-like stains, and I swabbed both sides for touch, and that was designated 88-3-2S1.
And both of those particular items, 88-3-1 and 88-3-2, were found by Mr. Parisi and Leighton Prince. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And just to confirm, your function in forensic biology is to look for possible biological evidence and potentially forward that evidence to DNA, correct?
That's correct.
You didn't do any DNA analysis in this case yourself, is that correct?
No, I did not.
I have nothing additional, Judge.
Your Honor, I'm offering Defense Exhibit R, which are some of the laboratory notes and documents from this witness as a full exhibit. I understand there's no objection.
I have no objection.
Defense are admitted as full.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I prefer using this surface rather than this podium, so excuse me for a minute. So I understand you're going to enjoy your retirement after this.
Yes,
Let me ask you some general questions first. You were at the forensic laboratory in Meriden for how long?
for about 21 years.
Did you work entirely in the biology section of the lab that entire time?
I did casework in the forensic biology section the entire time, but at different times, my focus of most of my work was in DNA. So about 50-50 split of my time when I was first hired, and then it was mostly DNA. And then at some point before 2015, I was asked to help out with the backlog in forensic biology. And then I requested to remain in forensic biology.
Well, I'm not going to ask you, you didn't do any of the DNA work in this case,
That's
correct?
correct.
But you, as having worked in the DNA lab for so long, knew what was important to try to obtain samples so that when it went to DNA, they could do whatever they had to do to make enough of a sample for them to extract a DNA profile, correct?
Correct. I'm not competent in the current DNA testing that they do. So after 2015, there was some training that I would have had to go through with some new methods. And I decided at that point that I was just going to stay in forensic biology.
No, trust me, I'm not going to quiz you on any of that. So I'm going to ask more basic questions. So when things do go to DNA, they have different testing for different items, correct?
I'm not, they have different extraction methods.
Yes. So you had mentioned earlier, there were some hairs that were extracted from some of the items that you examined, correct?
There was hair-like fibers collected from some of the submissions I examined, yes.
I thought there was also a picture of a human-like hair that you were shown an image of, were you not?
That's not me.
Oh, that was it was in the picture. So was that your
It said,
colleague?
it said hair-like fiber. I don't know if it's a human hair. I don't even know if it's a hair at that point.
Okay, so you have to physically observe everything that you're looking at, right?
Yes,
Do you use any kind of enhancements such as magnifying glasses or microscopes or anything like that in your line of work?
yes, if I'm doing a hair assessment, then I use a microscope. But if I'm just collecting trace, I don't.
Okay. So when you become involved in any case, the items are sent to you to be examined, correct?
Yes, that's my role in forensic biology.
But this isn't like a controlled experiment where you don't know anything about the case. Am I right?
That's correct.
You actually meet with the with detectives and police and maybe prosecutors, don't you?
Sometimes along the way, Probably not initially. I might have a phone call conversation, but we do get information that comes along when evidence is submitted.
In any event, this is evidence, or rather facts or investigation facts that aren't necessary for you to do your work, correct?
Well, I think if I'm going to examine something for sexual assault, I should know that, because then my focus will also be to look at if there's blood, but I'm not so necessarily going to be testing a blood stain or sending it for DNA testing if it's in the underwear. I'm more interested in if I find a semen stain. So I do need some information to go forward in how I'm going to go about examining the evidence.
Fair enough. Do you need to know where an item has been recovered for you to do your work?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to turn to exhibit R, and I'm going to ask if we could turn on the screen and look at, for my purposes, I have some of your, before we do that, let me just say, you prepared extensive notes from the laboratory on this case, correct?
Yes.
More than 100 pages easily, right?
Yes.
And in fact, just in front of you, just for your own edification, you have 2 large 3-ring notebooks, just so that if you had to refer to your notes, you have that there in front of you so you could refresh your recollection, right?
Yes, I mean, they're in plastic sleeve protectors, which add some volume. But yes, I looked at a lot of submissions in this case.
My point being, you can't remember from one case to another, especially years later, exactly what you did just based on a number or a letter or an item that's been identified, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And I take it after this case, you had many other cases that you had to work on. Is that
Yes,
fair?
this was in 2019. I didn't retire until the end of 2022. So I had, another 2.5 years of, well, 3.5 years of casework to do.
Now, keep on, that was during the COVID pandemic, and I guess the work dropped down a little during that time. Am I correct or no?
The COVID pandemic didn't really affect us until 2020.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Fair enough.
I think the same time it affected other people, that March date. The lab didn't close, but that's when, society changed quite a bit.
You're already in your job wearing protective gear, so I assume that came to you as second nature to have to do that during the pandemic, right?
Cleaning, yes.
Okay. So if I could ask that you could call up on exhibit R number 64, please. Could you zoom out a bit on that, please, so I have the whole document? So this is a page from your notes, correct?
That's correct.
If we look up in the upper right-hand corner, those are your initials and the date that you wrote this, correct?
Well, that's the date that I started this sheet. I added more information on 09 September of 2019, and then I added more information in February, which should have been, it says 19, but it should have been 2020.
Right. I'm only putting this up to show that this is the kind of material that you put in your reports, correct?
That goes in my case jacket, not in my report.
Fair enough, but it's part of the case file that's kept with the department even after you retire.
That's correct.
And I know I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but there's some discussion about locations. There's a mention that the top thing talks about a missing person. Did the name of the person make a difference to you in your work?
No,
The fact that there were homes, garages, Range Rovers, et cetera, did that matter to your work?
it mattered that things were collected from different scenes.
And so, for example, it talks about a Suburban being found at a park is the next line. Below that, garbage from Hartford. There's a mention of a Tacoma Toyota and the name of an employee, or at least a mention of an employee of Mr. Dulos. Do you see all that?
Yes,
Are these things that were told to you by law enforcement?
yes, or it was information in some of the paperwork associated with the evidence.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask you to look at 145 within my exhibit. Now, this is a list of some messages that we received. And again, there's many in this jacket, isn't there, in the whole file?
Yes, because I had questions as I went and examined evidence.
So it does mention, for example, that you spoke directly with the detective Matthew Riley. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you documented all your communications with the law enforcement people, correct?
I would think I did. Now, if someone called me and said, "Where are you on this case?" and I just said, "Well, I'm still examining the evidence," I don't know if I would have documented that.
All right, but if it was important enough maybe
Yes.
you were shared information or you provided information, you would document it, right?
Yes,
In fact, even if a defense lawyer like me were to call you, you would document that somewhere, right?
correct.
Now, there were a lot of items that were being submitted to you during the course of 2019 in this case, correct?
That's correct.
Were you under any kind of pressure to get it out faster than you would normally get it out in an average case?
Not faster, but that it should be your focus of your work. So if in the lab, you always have case assignments. So the director of the laboratory designated this as a level 2, which means that if you're assigned this case, then you put your other casework aside and you focus on this case
So it was given a higher priority, I take it, than some of your other,
by the director.
well, I don't mean by the director, right?
Yes, the director of the laboratory.
And the number of items that you had to examine was larger than your average amount of items that you examined, correct?
Yes, I would say this, it's not the only big case that I ever did, but this is one of the bigger ones, yes.
So I want to ask you to just explain some of the terms that were mentioned during your testimony on direct examination. You talked about touch DNA a few times, right? There are different kinds of examinations that you perform when you're sending something out to the DNA people after you've had the file. Is that correct? After you've had the item that you're examining.
Yes, I'm not sure what you mean by after I've had it, or I'm collecting samples while I'm examining it.
But you're making some initial determination of whether it's going to be blood or touch evidence, correct?
Well, it depends on what I'm collecting, the reason I'm collecting that sample. Yes, so I touch or a reddish brown stain. Now, sometimes when I'm collecting touch, as I explained, example would be the zip ties. I did do some initial testing, which told me that there were some positive screening tests for blood, but because the thing itself was pretty well stained, I collected the whole thing and I just called it touch. But I also knew that within that sample, I had tested screening tests for blood.
Right. So let me ask you what I was going to get to that, but let's do it right now. The screening test is, as you said, was either Kastle-Meyer or an OT test. I can't remember what that one was called. That's correct, right?
That's correct.
And a screening test by definition is simply that it's screening out certain materials so that it might be evidence of blood, correct?
Correct.
But as a scientist, if you weren't finished, I didn't want to interrupt you.
As we report it, it indicates the presence of blood.
And indicate means that it's something that you would then either test for further or assume it's blood and move on from there, correct?
No,
You wouldn't be able to come into a court and testify that after a KM test, that the item you tested did in fact contain human blood, could you?
I couldn't say that. If the test was positive, I can't even say for sure that it's blood, let alone human blood. That would require a confirmatory test.
Okay, and as I understand the testimony, there were only 3 times of all these items that you examined where you did a confirmatory test, correct?
That's correct.
Was that because there was I don't know, a money shortage or time shortage? Is the reason why you didn't do any other confirmatory tests?
Because I didn't want to consume any of the sample for that test, given that the fact that I was forwarding them to DNA and I knew the information that they could possibly get from DNA would be a lot more individualizing.
So as I understand your answer, if you tested with a confirmation test, so you would be able to say, yes, that was human blood using the either the I think it's the RSID or the hemotrace test.
The hemotrace, you can say, it indicates the presence of human blood. With the RSID test, you can say human blood is identified.
All right, and then you would have been able to say, yes, I found a particular stain was human blood, right? If it was tested positive using the RSID test, correct?
That's correct. Then I could confirm, that's why it's called a confirmatory test, that it's human blood.
If you had tested more of these samples, was it a concern that you might actually consume the entire sample by testing and then there would be nothing to send on to DNA?
My concern was that if I consumed some of it to do these tests, that I might be in some way having a negative effect on the possible DNA results.
Well, let me ask. I'm not sure I understand that answer, so let me see if I understand it. by having a negative effect, it means it makes the sample even smaller, which would make it more difficult for them to obtain a profile. Is that at least part of your
Yes.
concern?
They may be able to get a profile, but you don't know if it's a single source or a mixture. So maybe the interpretation would be affected by sending them less sample.
All right, and even back in the day when you worked in DNA, you had to do something called electrophoresis to kind of sort of tease out a DNA sample, correct? Is that something that even back when you were in the lab, in the DNA lab, you had to do?
Well, there's a lot of steps before that,
course.
and there's a lot of steps after that. But that's the part that the instrumentation works on to separate the amplified fragments of DNA.
All right, and again, I'm trying to make this simpler for everybody, but what you're saying is if there are multiple, possibly multiple sources mixed in a sample, whether it's skin or any other substance, it's harder to tell the difference if there's a smaller sample, isn't that?
No, that's not, I'm saying individuals, a mixture as in individuals, not a mixture as in where the DNA is coming from.
Oh, no, I didn't mean that. I meant mixture of how many people and who they are.
Yes, but you just said blood or skin or something.
Well, isn't it the same, whatever they're testing in the DNA, unless it's hair, they do it the same way? All
Then I don't understand what you were talking about.
right, maybe
When-
I don't either, so I'll move on. Okay.
Well, I could say what I was trying to say, which
Okay.
was, if you have a mixture of people in a sample, which I don't know when I'm collecting or passing on a swab,
Sure.
if I use some of that for a test, which in my opinion gives less information than a DNA testing does, and I've diminished the amount that's going forward or reduced it, and that may affect the interpretation of a DNA profile that's a mixture of multiple people or just two people, then that is the reason why I'm not doing a test that would say, yes, it's human blood, or it indicates the presence of human blood.
And just so that I can move on from that. So what are you saying that by testing it for a confirmatory test, you're diminishing the amount of whatever the item is, which makes it more difficult to make the determination of the number or the individuals in DNA? Is that a fair way to put it?
I'm saying that I don't know if it will, but I don't want to reduce the amount that's going forward because I don't know what that result is down the line. So a lot of these swabs, I just going by the color of them, grayish, brownish, reddish brown. So I'm going to forward them where they will get the most information out of those swabs.
Let me ask you then some questions about the procedure. So you have something that you used and used at the time called a blood and touch evidence examination worksheet for each of the items, correct? That you tested.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to just, we're not going to go into the 100 or whatever number we just went through, but I'm going to go through a few of them and maybe you can explain the form to me as we go through it. Could you please pull up document 54, please? Do you see this document in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Is this your handwriting?
Yes, it is.
So this is it begins with the laboratory case up at the top, am I right?
Yes.
There is there is some language, I'm not gonna ask you about everything on this page, but this is a form that was developed by the Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection, Division of Scientific Services, correct?
Correct.
That was the department you worked for at the time, right?
Correct. This was developed by the forensic biologists.
Someone before,
The
Well-
supervisors in the forensic biologist unit developed this form.
and everyone who works in that division has to fill out this form when they're working on an item that's used, correct?
Well, we have a lot of forms, depends on the situation.
Do you
Some
have to
people-
use this form if you're examining an item for either blood or skin cells or something along those lines?
Yes, this is the form that I would use.
All right, so if you look at your name, your initials CMR are up in the right-hand corner there, that's correct?
That's correct.
And then there is right below your initials, there's a number 502I on this one, you see that?
Correct.
That was the number assigned by the state police to this particular item, correct?
That's correct.
Now, there's also under submission, there is a description. In this case, it says 53-bag with one standard white towel with blood-like stains. And you have that in quotations. Do you see that?
Yes.
It ends in quotations. I want to be clear. You did not give this description to this item, did you?
No,
This is the title that was given to this item by whichever investigative agency gathered it and submitted it to you, correct?
that's correct.
In order for you to remain consistent, you use their terminology, correct?
Yes, that's why it's in quotes.
Whether it's accurate or not, you just use their terminology, right?
That's correct.
So, for example, if they said that it was a ketchup-like stain, you would have written that, right?
Yes,
Okay. There's some discussion here and the contents, this is below where it says this is your description of what you observe when you open up the package. Is that fair to say?
yes,
And then I'm going to just ask you now about the chart that we see here. So there is on the left a little number sign and then the number 53. You see that?
yes,
Now, 53, if we went through the stipulation, would be the number that the laboratory assigned to at least this sample from 502I. Is that a fair statement?
yes, that's true.
And then you talk about where something was either swabbed or examined, right? That's in this next column over.
The next column over shows collection location, so that would be the where.
Wait, okay. Now, what about the swabbing quantity? What does that mean?
That means if I, let's see. If I had swabbed that stain, then I would have put the number of. If I was collecting for touch or something, so I was creating the swabs, that swab number would go under swabbing quantity.
All right. And if it says R/B, what does that mean?
Reddish brown,
Reddish brown. Okay. So these are your terminology, correct on this?
that's right,
And the bottom ones, for example, says pinkish. You observed something that looked pink or pinkish, right?
correct.
And you indicated the collection location is, you've described that, so I'm not going to go into it here, but where on an item you either examined or took a swab or cut a piece, whatever you did, this is where it would be, correct?
Correct.
Now, let me ask you about the next column. It has KM/OT. You see that?
Correct.
We're talking about right here. This is where you did the screening test, right?
Correct.
And as you indicated, you did some of these KM tests yourself.
Yes,
Some of them were done by the police, but you would put that in quotes on the document KM plus or KM minus, right?
correct.
If you did it, the purpose here is, again, it's just a screening test to determine whether it needs some further exam, correct?
Correct.
If it is, like, if we look in the third one down, for example,
Yes.
this one, right? In that column, in that column, it says NT, you see that?
Correct.
And NC, and they're both circled. NT means not tested, correct?
Correct.
And what does NC mean?
Not collected.
So whatever that was observed in that one, nope, you did not collect it. You left it on the towel, or in this case, whatever this, yeah, on the towel itself, right?
That's correct.
And then there are other words. I just want it to be clear for the jury. If it says in that box, there's a POS, that would mean positive, correct?
Yes,
INC would be inconclusive,
correct.
and NEG would mean, I think, negative, right?
Correct.
And then down below in the same box, there's an NA. That means not applicable.
That's correct.
And it would be not applicable if it was the kind of thing you couldn't collect off of whatever the item was. Is that a fair way to look at that term?
No, that would be for something that I collected for, say, touch and not applicable.
Meaning, maybe you could explain that. If you were going to collect it for touch, we use terms like touch DNA. We're really talking about skin cells when you use that term, right?
Well, we're talking about any biological material that might be deposited there. Yes, when you touch something, you leave epithelial skin cells behind. So yes, that is one source of the biological material that's there.
Sure. And when you say some, you started to say somebody, it can also be transferred by touching a person too, right?
Yes,
Or a
if
thing.
somebody rubbed my shoulder here, then it may be possible to detect their DNA if I swab that.
Sure, but we're just using the word touch as a shorthand for transfer of the epidural cells, right?
Yes, or I like to use the general term biological material.
Fair enough. And you did indicate that KM does test positive for other, not just, you said human, animal blood, but for other kinds of even plants. Isn't that right?
Plant peroxidases will give a positive result. So because the heme and hemoglobin has a peroxidase-like activity, so therefore, like plant peroxidases would also give a positive result.
Okay, so let's go then over to the next column. This is the column where it would have indicated if you actually did a confirmatory test, right?
That's correct.
And if you did the confirmatory test, then you'd be able to say, if it in fact was human blood, you would check box positive, right? The POS,
That's correct.
or it would be negative. The choices were positive, negative, inconclusive, correct?
Correct.
And below that, it's IFT and NFT. The IFT stands for insufficient for testing, correct?
Correct.
And the NFT stands for what?
No further testing. That
Wait.
means by me, not that it couldn't go on to DNA.
Of course, but we're talking about your work, not
Yes,
someone else's.
yes, but I wanted to make that clear.
Of course. So I wanted to make it clear for the jury, you did no further testing on
Yes.
the items, and I'm just using a few of these as examples, right?
Yes,
And then if it was going to go on to DNA, there's a disposition, this box here, right?
yes,
And there's 2 columns. It's then given, you start with the 53 that's over on this side, right?
correct.
And then you add sample 1, sample 2. That's what the S stands for in each of these, right?
It really stands for the S that was given to forensic biology, serology, but it's just like other sections might have a G or a T or something. But for forensic biology, we're using the S. So anybody who sees 53S1 knows that the described the trace materials.
That you observed.
Yes,
And again, do you use, is it just your regular eyesight, or do you use sometimes a magnifying glass or any kind of screen to enlarge something?
it's just my regular eyesight.
Right. And then occasionally, and I'm not even going to ask you this, there's occasionally you'll add notes at the bottom of something else that you did maybe at a later date, correct?
Yes,
Okay. So I'm going to then turn to the next, number 55, please. That's the next page 2 of 2, right? So I'm not going to go through it. This is still the same towel that we're talking about, right?
that's correct.
And it still says 53 at the top, correct?
Correct.
And 53 down the side.
Yes,
And these would be additional places that you did an examination on that particular item, right?
yes, or observations.
Or observations that you made, correct?
Yes,
Am I right?
yes,
So for example, the last one down here, right? It doesn't show any kind of swabbing or anything collected, but you made a note in 1, 2, 3, in the 4th box down here, correct?
correct.
And you indicated here, no touch type sample was collected due to overall skin
No, overall
stains and staining.
stains and staining. Yes,
Right.
that's correct.
And that means that based on what you found, you just assume whatever that stain is, you've already sent it over or recommended it go to the DNA section, correct?
No,
All right. So why would you make that notation there?
because there's so much reddish brown stains and staining that to go around and try to avoid all those stains to collect a touch type stain is not possible.
So let's go to page 6, number 686, please. Now this had 3 separate numbers that were on one worksheet, correct?
Correct.
And were you aware that although this is shorthand, it says unstained area of steering wheel, blood-like staining of steering wheel, and 136 was interior side of left front door. You see that, right?
Yes, I can see the descriptions.
All right. And again, I'm only going to ask you about the one, this is the same form, different data that was entered, correct?
No, this is a swab only multiple submission worksheet.
And this is based on the fact that someone else submitted swabs to you and you were examining those swabs that were presented to you, right?
That's correct.
The swabs come to you in a tube with a large Q-tip, like a COVID test type thing.
They come in various ways. They come in what we call a swab carton, which is they're inside the submission packaging, or we call it a swab sleeve, which is like a paper sleeve, or very rarely they come in loose in the packaging. And sometimes they have, there's these kits that form a cardboard box around the swabs. And so they're dried inside this cardboard box. So those are the various ways that we get swabs inside the outer packaging.
So when you look at the individual, I'm only going to refer to the middle. Did I just change?
You changed the
Did the
page.
image get changed?
You did change the page.
Oh, I must have pressed, can you put it on 86, please? That's better. Okay. So on 135 is the one in the middle. You see that here, right?
Yes,
It's described as a number 135, blood-like staining of steering wheel. You see that?
yes, I do.
Now, without going back to my sheet, do you recall that this was, and from your notes, that this was a swab taken from the steering wheel of a 2017 Chevy Suburban in New Canaan, Connecticut.
I would have to look at my notes because there are swaps from so many different locations.
Well aware, so,
I could look at the, out here. So that's 135.
yes.
From the packaging, it says it was collected from the Chevrolet Suburban. Yes.
Right, but just, since there's more than one in this case, do you just say where it was collected?
On the request, I think there was more information. Belonging to victim,
Okay,
yes.
so if the alleged victim, right, that's who, someone else described it as victim, but we're talking about alleged.
I'm reading
Well,
the
before we
information on
proceed-
the request for,
The witness is reading from the document in front of her.
Okay,
She's not subject to the agreements between you and counsel for the
okay,
state.
fair enough. You're reading from a document that someone else prepared, right?
correct.
Okay, so I want to be clear, even though the title of this item, blood-like staining of steering wheel, you tested this using a screening OT for blood, did you not?
That's correct.
And your response, what was the finding using the screening?
It was negative.
So again, the fact that someone else calls it blood-like staining does not mean that there's blood once you actually even do a screening test, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And just if you go quickly go to page 87. Again, this is also various, and I'm not going to go through each thing on this, but this is another page of your worksheet where these were swabs collected by others, correct?
Correct.
And submitted to you for review. Is that right?
For processing, yes.
For processing. So we have 137, 138, and 139, correct?
Correct.
And 137 was identified to you as a left front seat adjustment control, correct?
Yes.
And you did a reagent test or a screening test for blood on this swab, correct?
No,
Can you tell us why it's NA?
because it's not applicable because it's a touch sample.
Okay. And then rear view mirror, again, it was for a touch sample, not a screening test for blood, right?
Yes, I didn't do the test because it was a touch sample.
And the cargo area rear seat controls, again, you did a screen for touch, is that right?
No, we don't have a screening test for touch.
Oh, so you just create the sample to pass on to DNA? Is that what you do?
There is nothing that would, I'm not sure I understand your question, because these are all NAs. These three submissions are touch, and we don't have a test for touch in forensic biology. The test would be to go on to DNA to see what DNA, if any, is on those swabs.
So you don't even do a test to see if there's anything organic on the swabs?
That's correct.
Oh, so you just, when it says, for example, over on the right there, 139S1, 138S1, and 137S1, you just pass these along after looking at them. Is that a fair statement?
Right, I have to cut the swabs off, put them in a tube, properly labeled. Then I have to itemize the swabs in our LIMS system, which is how we track our evidence. And then the tubes are then put into a plastic Ziploc type bag and heat sealed and initialed. And then I create a transfer sheet, which lists all the items that I'm sending over. And that is the information that will be eventually passed along to the DNA analyst.
Fair enough. I'm going to ask then that you look at 164. You were asked questions specifically about this item 97, which was identified as license plate and screws, or it says plate and screws, but you recall this was one of the license plates that you were shown and asked about, correct?
Yes,
It says the word touch is written on some of these. Sometimes it's not written, sometimes it is. Does that mean that you looked at it solely for purposes of touch and did not consider whether to look for any kind of presumptive screening test for blood, right?
yes, as you see there on the fourth row down, no blood-like stains noted on screws and washers. So therefore, all I was doing was collecting touch samples from the license plate and the screws.
And you did observe on 97-1 that there was rust-like deposits noted, correct?
Noted, right,
And again, we go over to the right side to DNA and you assign it an S number, correct?
correct.
Now, if you would turn to image 177, you were shown this for a little bit, and I'm going to ask you about this document. All right?
Okay.
You recall, now it's
Can I pull out my, look at my
absolutely,
worksheets?
absolutely.
Okay,
If this was noted, and there's a little square over on the side there, is this your handwriting right there?
you mean the paper that's
Yeah,
on
the
the
little with the
ruler?
number on it.
Yes,
So even though it's on the side, that indicates that this would be item 99, correct?
correct,
And then the image, as I understand it, when you were shown it, these are the various places where you took swabs.
correct,
And so we would go back to a worksheet similar to what I showed you earlier on, correct?
correct.
So if we can then go to 174, this includes, and it's going to be more than one page, there were a number of, it's 174 and 175, just if you could just show the witness 175, please. So these two pages actually set forth what happened with each one of those swabs that you examined that are located in the photograph that we just looked at document 177, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And I just want to be clear if you go back to 174 for a minute. The first 4 of those swabs were negative for the screening test, correct?
That's correct.
The 5th and the 6th ones that are down here at the bottom, you said were positive, but there's some notes. Could you just explain what the notes say? Because it's hard to read, please.
So it says positive, and then it has a little weak times 4, which means I swabbed the area with 4 swabs, and I took a few fibers off of the 4 swabs, combined them, and got a weak positive OTAL result. And I did that, so they were collected on 9/10, and I tested the now dry swabs on 9/11.
And these were also passed on to DNA, correct?
Yes,
The same thing for the final one on this page, same thing? Weak, is that what the W stands for?
yes, weak, and I just tested a few fibers from 1 swab.
If you go to the next page, the top one talks about a panel handle area. Do you see that? The top one?
Yes,
That was the location and that we could go back and look at the image, but this would be S7, right?
correct,
We could tell that because over here at the end, that's where the 7 is.
correct,
So we look at that picture, we could look at this, we know which area, correct?
correct.
And there's both a positive and an NT in the same box. Do you see that on this
Correct.
right here?
Yep.
Could you explain how it has both in the same box?
Because you can see positive 1X, so that means I just tested a small portion, just a few stained fibers from 1 swab, and then I didn't test any of the second swab.
Well, what does NT1X mean? You
The
only,
1X means the other swab, because there's 2 swabs, so one swab got tested and 1 swab didn't.
and then you made a comment in the next column over for that one and the next couple down. You said insufficient for testing. Do you see that?
Right,
Did you try to test for blood
no,
using a confirmatory test?
no,
It was insufficient because it was too small a sample?
because, yes, there wasn't not enough sample, and I had to switch to OTAL, which is the more sensitive test, and so insufficient is what I believe was the correct interpretation of what I collected.
Okay. Again, none of these items were subjected then on 99 to confirmatory testing to determine if in fact it was human blood or even blood.
That's
Right.
correct.
Okay. Let's go now to that. You were showing some pictures of the doorknob. Is that correct?
Yes,
I'm going to try and move faster here. If you could just put up document 366, please. Just to refresh everyone's memory, this is a doorknob that was provided to you. It's not attached to a door, correct?
yes,
It was a doorknob with a plate and screws that was provided to you, correct?
these pictures are the knob without the screws. At the top, it says without screws.
Oh, I just missed that. Okay, but if we look at, I was more interested in down along the right-hand column over here.
Yes,
It says, would you just explain what it says?
so, This photograph I took while the evidence was in the LP unit. When I got the evidence back on a later date, on 06/01/19, I tested that area with O-toluidine and it was positive, and it was a reddish brown staining with ridge-like detail. I don't call things that may look like a latent print or a patent print a print, because I'm not a latent print examiner, so I describe them as ridge-like detail.
Okay.
So that's what that is on the side there.
And since you're not in the part, you know that someone else did an examination and made some determination about what that ridge-like detail was, right?
The latent print examiner.
Yes. Okay. And you, again, here, it says here that you did a OT plus, correct?
Yes,
That's right.
correct.
And if you go to 365 now, this would be the worksheet of the results of your examination of that doorknob without the screws, correct?
Well, that also is the other doorknob also, the one with the screws. So 44-1 is the two knobs and the plate. So it's the whole submission.
Okay. In any event, there were no confirmatory tests done for human blood on any of the samples, either the front of the knob, the back of the knob, the plate, or the screws, correct?
Well, I only had one sample that was reddish brown.
Yeah.
And I did the OTOL testing on that one sample, which was positive, the one we just discussed, and it was insufficient for further testing. So the answer to that one sample that I took that was reddish brown and I did the screening test on is it was insufficient for further testing for the confirmatory test for human blood.
So you were unable to confirm that it was blood, right?
Yes, that's true. I didn't even do the test.
Because of how little it was?
Yes, how little it was.
Okay. And the next items, NT again means not tested, correct?
Correct.
And then the next three, NA means, again, not applicable to the particular item because they were touch.
Yes, it was ridge-like detail touch.
Okay. Could you go to 386, please? Do you remember examining an item that was identified as a metal scraper with broken blade?
Yes, I remember.
Okay, and you were shown this picture earlier today.
Yes,
You would go now to 385. This is the examination worksheet that you did on that item, the metal scraper, correct?
yes,
And I believe it indicated, would you note what you said about it in the second box down?
no blood-like stains noted on blade or tool or blade holder.
Now, if you look up at the top, you actually noted it looked like a rust-like appearance. Isn't that true if you look at the description?
Yes,
So you didn't see anything that you considered to be a blood-like stain, right?
that's correct.
Just out of curiosity, the word tool, is that, you're just describing that this is a tool? Is that what you mean
Well,
by that?
I divided this item submission up into two different areas. The part that holds the blade, razor blade, that kind of goldish part. So I call that the blade holder and the blade. And then the rest of this tool, I call the tool, to just distinguish those two areas. The part that maybe someone held a little more, and maybe this part, you don't know what that area was used for. So just to collect the samples from two different areas.
And that's why I called it tool.
Yes, to just distinguish the major part of the glass scraper, and then end, which holds the blade and the partial blade that's sitting in it.
All right, so if we go to 394, please. This is 41-3 that was described as a garbage bag. And I'm just going to ask you, if you look at this worksheet, there were 4 entries on this worksheet, correct?
Yes,
You did not test any of these even for a screening test of blood, correct? On this, I'll show you another page, but I'm saying on these samples, correct?
well, let's see. Can I have a moment?
Sure.
No, I did not.
Okay, now, can I have 395? This is listed as a panty liner. Do you see this?
Yes,
You did if you look at the first item, you did do a screening test using KM Castlemeyer, correct?
correct.
but you noted that it was insufficient for further testing, right?
That's correct.
And then sent it on to DNA, right?
Yes.
And the other samples from the absorbent side and from the other side, et cetera, as you go down this list, you did not do any other testing, correct?
There was a small reddish brown, brownish stain, which I did not test.
Okay,
And then there were some pinkish stains, which I didn't test. And then on the absorbent side, there was also brownish faint stains, which I didn't test.
all right. So your answer is you didn't test any of the other items, right?
Other stains, yes.
Other things. Okay, now let's turn to 408, please. There's been some extensive testimony about these, this garbage bag with the knot in the middle, correct?
Yes, I see that.
So
sorry, what
you had
page?
characterized this, or you it made it part of 41-3 because that's where the previous item came out of the panty line, right?
No, the panty liner was 41-3-1.
Okay.
So the panty liner came out of the garbage bag.
Oh, okay. So 41-3 was the garbage bag that the panty liner came out of, correct?
Correct.
So if we can now go to 461, please. Again, this is one of these blood and touch worksheets that we've gone over a bunch of times.
Correct.
This is the, this is now a zip tie exam that you did, correct?
Correct.
And for this one, you tested, again, you did the Castlemeyer screening test, right?
Correct.
Says you did.
Yes.
But it's also, you circled NC in the same box, is that correct?
Yes. And then I wrote next to it at this time.
Okay, which means at that time, you didn't test it a second time, right?
No, that means that I didn't collect it at that time.
Oh, okay. And then you checked in the next box, no further testing, is that right?
That's correct. And if you look below, the third row, 52-1, which is after they'd come back from Leighton Prince, I swabbed the entire surface, including that reddish brown stain, where I have a note, see above.
So let's look at that for a second. You brought this up. You didn't check any of the boxes there, is that right?
Because I said see above.
Which means there was no difference from what you did before, right?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Well, which above are we referring to that you brought up on June 18th, 2019?
The first row where I did some testing, it was positive. I tested 2 areas of reddish brown staining and I didn't collect them because it was going to go to Leighton Prince. And well, that's actually the reason was there was so much reddish brown staining on that item that I wanted to swab the entire surface to collect the reddish brown stains and touch after Leighton Prince.
All right, there's other items. I'm going to skip a couple of them. I'll just put them up on the screen so the jury can see. There's a similar report, 462, that's in here for the zip ties, 52-2. The form is the same, so people can understand the terms that are in here the same as the other pages, correct?
Yes, they're the same form.
Okay, and then we'll go to 463. There is reference here to a, fiber-like item. Do you see that at the top?
Correct.
Is that what you were testifying before, that you don't know if it was hair or something else, but it was fiber-like? You gave it a biology number and it was sent on?
Yes, it was retained.
Okay. 464, please. Again, this is all from those garbage bags that are 52. You did the same thing with these items here, the same form?
No, this is not from a garbage bag. This was a separate submission, 52 with 4 zip ties in it.
So is this from the same zip ties, correct?
I'm sorry, you said it was from the garbage bag.
I misspoke. It's from the zip ties, correct?
This worksheet is 52-4, which is a zip tie.
And the previous page was also from the zip ties, correct?
Yes, 52-3.
All right. We go to 485, please. This is 88-1, correct?
Yes.
Your Honor, I do have about maybe 10 more minutes. I'm wondering if this is a good place to stop for the day.
It
I'm
is.
losing my voice.
It is. We are going to have Mr. Roy back again tomorrow morning, correct?
May we approach, Judge?
Yes. open session tomorrow at 10 o'clock. As usual, please avoid any media coverage and please do not discuss these matters with anyone at any time. Thank you for your patience, and we plan to see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock.
Okay. That was short and sweet, all right.
All rise. This Honorable Superior Court now stands adjourned until tomorrow at 10 a.m. Please exit courtroom.
Oh, let's see. Well, the court was merciful and let me get lots of sleep today. It was much needed after the last 48 hours. So 10 o'clock Eastern tomorrow, and then we have the weekend. I need to catch up on yesterday because I dozed while listening to yesterday's during the morning. Then we ran off for a family gathering for lunch, and so I still have some catching up to do. But thank you very much for joining me, and we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon and evening. Bye-bye.